This webinar is part of the Southwest Research and Outreach Center Advancing Ag series. This educational series actually includes monthly events that bring together a diverse panel of researchers and specialists to address a crop production topic from multiple disciplines. In this case, we are going to be talking about cover crops in the state of Minnesota and in the region. We have a few pre-submitted questions we will be addressing, but we will also take questions live. Please submit your questions through the Q&A feature of the Zoom platform. With that said, I would like to start by first introducing our speakers. I am really happy that all four of them agreed to be part of this event. So I really didn't want just to go ahead and have everybody talking in an, how to say, not organized way. So I figured out that I wanted first to have one of them who is Dr. Guillermo Marcido. He is an Agri Systems Modeler at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Welcome, Guillermo. Guillermo has been doing a lot of work with cover crops and modeling and those kind of things. And I thought it would be great to have him talking first because some of the issues we face here in the state is that difficulty we have for having cover crops established and these different tools that we have been using to try to understand or advance our understanding on how cover crops perform under this very special region. Then we are going to have Professor Jay Norton. He is a professor and soils extension specialist at the University of Wyoming. I would like to state that my previous work was at the University of Wyoming, where I had the opportunity to work along with Jay Norton and his group. I have really a very great experience there. And but the time I was there, we started to work with cover crops. And I thought it might be interesting to have him as a panelist of this webinar, because even though there are differences between Wyoming and Minnesota, they are also struggling with, having cover crops established there for probably things that Jay is going to address later. Then we will have Dr. José Hernández. He's a senior agronomic data scientist at Indigo Agriculture. And please excuse me if I go wrong with this, José, but basically his company is one of the leading, startups, I would say, as Indigo, that is working with, leading the way to work with the what we call carbon market and all the possibilities that our farmers might have. And the idea was also to hear from the private sector and how we could eventually put some value on the cover crops that we are trying to have into our cropping systems in the region. And last but not least, we will have Dr. William Lazarus. He's a professor and extension economist at the University of Minnesota. And again, we would like to know how much value our cover crops have. And I know that Bill has been working on, trying to determine that specific issue for our cover crops in the state. With all that said, I would like to welcome everybody and welcome our panelists. And I will pass it to Guillermo, who is going to have some few minutes to give a little bit of an introduction of what he's doing. And then we will go with Jay, Jose, and finally with Bill. Please, Guillermo.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. Are we allowed to share figures right now or later on?
Yes,
okay.
you should.
Let bring this up. Okay. Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me, it's a delight for me to have accepted the invitation that Axel kindly extended to me a few weeks ago. I said yes immediately whenever I hear the words regenerative agriculture, sustainability, and models. Those sort of words are like a soup of interest that bring out of my mind immediately, and I'm excited to share today with such a distinguished a table of panelists today. My name is Guillermo Marcido. I go by Guillermo. I work right now for the University of Illinois. I have some of background in modeling of different cropping systems. I have experience integrating data in different formats, in different streamlines, with a major interest in tuning models and using models as analytical and prescription solutions to predict and prescribe better ways to produce sustainably and profitably as well. So I have prepared a few figures today just to give us a brief overview of what cover crops mean for agriculture in the United States. In this slide, all these three dots in here, the ones that I'm pointing out right now, represent the yield of corn with cover crops relative to the yield of corn without a cover crop. So that is a percentage number, so above the unit. And there are three different categories here that represent three specific periods in United States research regarding cover crops. And this was a meta study, kind of a compilation of peer-reviewed research for 65 years in the United States. And overall, what we saw here is that cover crops over this 65-year period, 50-year period, have been 8% higher relative to corn without a cover crop. And you know, this is kind of the same analogy that we have when we look at an interesting movie, at a beautiful novel that we jump at the conclusion, it's a beautiful story. But there are a lot of moving pieces in there, right? And back then we took their time just to disaggregate these effects and to see how management, how regional effects have a play in all of this. And one of the things that we discovered when we were looking at this overall picture of cover crops in United States agriculture was that data is very sparse. Data is not really readily available. Long-term studies regarding cover crops are not a thing that was common in the past. Is getting some kick, some momentum right now. But modeling a cover crop system is very difficult. And that was one of the things that we learned over this process. So we're here right now with things in my group in Illinois and in several other projects that I have collaborated in the past, is in basically merging the tools from prescriptive and digital agriculture. So how we merge different pools of information regarding, you know, different formats, different resolutions, sensors, satellite imagery, hyperspectral images, color balances, et cetera, and collate those with ground truth biomass that has been coming from trial experiments. And it's a kind of a daunting task because the data, as I was saying, is sparse, is not very uniform in that way. But this figure is a schematic of some of the projects that we carried out with USDA and Esri, the company that provides geographic information system solutions, into filtering imagery and compute, you know, vegetative indices or numbers that somehow describe the health status of a canopy, of a plant community, and track down the state of growth of different cover crops planted under conditions of the mid-Atlantic United States. It is not the Midwest, but we were able to fit a few good applications with artificial intelligence and statistics and some models also that involve processes more at a physiological level. And out of all of these lessons, all of these publications that we put out there is where I am right now. And this figure, this is a very simple schematic where the idea is basically to have a looping of decision, where we use a modeling perspective to simulate the environment. And by the environment, I mean all the soil and weather variability that goes over the years that we are unable to capture with field trials. Field trials for cover crops are expensive. It's very hard to get replicates and strong data sets. We hope that the situation changes. Right now that we have some kickoff from the government that are advising on putting out some dollars on federal research for cover crops. And in partnership with high computing resources from the University of Illinois, we're feeding up all these plethora or universe of millions of simulations capturing the decisions that a farmer might have in the Midwest in regard to decisions with the cash crop system, corn, soybean, and also cover crops is part of this suite. That's why I joined this group, to provide some assistance in terms of modeling the cover crop system. And with all of those data points, then some collaborators in the area of artificial intelligence are somehow designing a system for farmers somehow to balance the maximum performance or biomass of a cover crop at a level that maintain yield productivity, but also sequester carbon in the soil. And this is a project that will be getting some momentum in the few months from now. And I think that one of the major strengths of just to capture the final message in this short introduction is that models can be a great way to generate data that are unable to get otherwise. And I think that this is kind of a good short picture of what I'm working at and what I'm going to move forward.
Oh, thank you, Guillermo. This is really a very nice presentation. I wish we have more time to hear more from what you are doing. Next, I would like to hear from Jay. Jay, would you mind to turn your video on? Hey, Jay, you are muted. Okay, maybe we can change the order. José, would you mind to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yes, just give me a second here to get set.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, can you see my presentation view right now?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Axel, for the invitation, and thank you everyone for attending. I think it's again it's great to see a few familiar names. I'm based in Minnesota, so it's always fun to see some colleagues. As Axel mentioned earlier, my name is José Hernández, and I am an agronomic data scientist with Indigo Agriculture. And in my past life, I used to work at University of Minnesota Extension. So I have a little bit of experience there with some of the nutrient management work that's been done. What I'm going to be presenting today is a little bit about what Indigo is and what we're doing, and hopefully contribute with some of the questions that may come up a little bit later. As Axel mentioned, Indigo is a relatively new company. You may consider it a startup as well. We started in 2014. And the general mission or of Indigo is to harness agriculture to help farmers, sustainably feed the planet. A lot of our emphasis is on improving farmers' profitability. We know that if there is not going to be an increase in profit, there's not going to be that key benefit and driver for implementing sustainable ag, right? And we're also about improving the general sustainability of agriculture globally. We're not only working in North America, but we're also working in South America and Europe, and aligning those agricultural practices with the consumer health in general. We have different offers or different divisions within Indigo agriculture. You may hear about Indigo transport and Indigo marketplace and Indigo biologicals, which is where the company started. But in 2019, officially we started with Indigo Carbon. Now, just to clarify here, what Indigo does, it connects the farmers that are implementing those carbon farming practices with some buyers, right, that will support those farmers for their regenerative agricultural practices and strategies. So we're trying to promote that agricultural system that will reduce carbon emissions, as well as restore soil health and, just improve the general cropping system and environment. Also support farmers that are transitioning to more regen practices, and of course compensating them for their work on carbon farming. And the idea here is to drive immediate and lasting impacts. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit quicker. We know that based on our internal research and others, agriculture is part of the emissions in greenhouse gases, right? But we can also have a great potential for some of the drawdown or some of the capture of those emissions. So here's where we're playing a role. And we know that agriculture is scalable, affordable, and it can be it can have an immediate effect in this sequestration, right, as compared to others. This doesn't mean that agroforestry or forestry in general, it doesn't have any potential. It's more about, what's scalable, affordable, and immediate. We're working primarily on a few practices that I'm going to highlight, but cover crops is one of them. We know that there's been a great adoption in cover crops in the last few years, shown by some of the agricultural census, for example. We know that cover crops have increased, almost probably 8 to 10% every year, particularly in the Midwest. It's easy to implement, or relatively easy to implement. Of course, depends many on site-specific conditions, which I'm sure we're going to be discussing today. And it has great value for the operation, right? Not only in soil health, but it may improve your yield. It may enhance your nutrient cycling in general. We're also working with conservation tillage in general, right? So this is a practice that is much more adopted throughout the United States. And we know that it also has many benefits for the operation, right? It can improve yield stability, for example. It can improve, it can just generally improve your carbon storage. So those are some of the things that can really improve in your operation. Of course, reduce soil losses is one of the ones that really help. Another one that is key for us is nutrient management, particularly nitrogen management, right? So if we can fine tune nitrogen rates, we know there's going to be not only water quality benefits, but also emissions benefits, right? In terms of the nitrous oxide emissions. So here are some of the practices that we are working on right now in Indigo, and that we are connecting again farmers that are doing these practices with investors that are paying for some of these regen ag practices. If you're interested in Indigo, or you haven't learned too much about them, I encourage you to go to indigoag.com/carbon to learn more about it. And I'll stop here, Axel.
Thank you, Jose. Very interesting, actually. I would like to know more about Indigo. It's quite exciting. Well, next, just for the sake of time, Jay, are you ready?
I hope so. Can you hear me now?
I can hear and I can see you, man. Go ahead.
Great. My internet is acting very unstable, so I hope it lasts. Yeah, my name's Jay Norton. I'm a soil scientist and extension specialist at the University of Wyoming. And I work in cover crops in two situations: in dryland wheat fallow systems in southeastern Wyoming, which is the only sort of part of 3 counties in southeastern Wyoming. Is the only area where we can grow anything in Wyoming without irrigation. And then I work in northwestern Wyoming in irrigated sugar beet barley systems, where there's a window of opportunity after barley to plant a cover crop or typically an annual forage. And we're really limited by moisture. So in dryland wheat systems, cover crops are really challenging. And we haven't been able to do it in a way where if we get appreciable biomass, it really cuts down on the following wheat yield. So that makes a very difficult sell for farmers. But we're looking at some different scenarios. Right now, we've tried planting cover crops in the fall and then plant wheat into the cover crops. The cover crops winter kill, and the wheat comes up in the decomposing cover crop biomass. At least that's our hope. And we've seen that in greenhouse studies, we've seen that wheat responds well to the decomposing biomass, where if we plant cover crops in the spring, terminate them in the early summer, we just think that any biomass that's produced is basically gone by wheat planting in the fall. In the irrigated system, it works a lot better. But timeliness is really important. Everything has to be done on time, and I think that's the case with cover crops in general. But anyway, I'll stop there, Axel, and hopefully have time for discussion and questions.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you very much, Jay. Yeah, I realize and I understand this, the difficulties of growing cover crops in Wyoming. I remember when I was there in Powell, in the northwestern part of the state, how hard it was, basically, as you said, because the most limiting factor in that case is water. And water is really, a big thing there, right? So yeah, we are already having some questions coming in. But let's first hear from our economist. Please, Bill. Now is your,
Axel.
your time. Hi.
Axel, thank you for the invitation here. And I guess as I think about the economics of cover crops, I guess the first question would be, what's the situation? What cash crops are you following and planting into? And certainly affects the timing and what's feasible in terms of species and that sort of thing, as well as what objectives you're trying to accomplish. Is it erosion, soil health, or grazing, or something else? So it's hard to say either cover crops are profitable or they're not profitable, because the situations vary so widely that an answer like that wouldn't be very useful. And in southwestern Minnesota, certainly you've got all that corn and grain and soybeans, so you're pretty much limited to a few species like cereal rye and seeding either into a mature crop in September or something, or after harvest. So they carry their own risks in terms of failure and everything that needs to be considered. On the other hand, if you're dealing with canning peas or corn silage or something where you've got a wider planting window and everything, the options are a lot greater. I don't have a lot of time for detail here. Certainly there are sources of information that you should be looking at if you're interested in this. Guillermo mentioned that meta-analysis, which is mainly research studies. There are also surveys of farmer experience. One is a national survey by USDA's Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, together with the Conservation Tillage Institute out of Purdue, that have been doing surveys for a number of years. They're farmer observations, so it's got pluses and minuses to that. The plus is you get a lot of data coming in. I guess the negative is that you don't know much about the situations and how they are measuring the data that they contribute. So it's maybe not as reliable or as repeatable as research studies would be, but still they're very, very useful. And they're also decision tools if you're trying to work out the economics for your own situation. They can do it on pencil and paper, but there are spreadsheets and online tools. You're interested in more information on that, ask me later in the Q&A, and I can go into more detail. On the cost side, studies tend to show a pretty wide range of seed costs from just a few dollars up to $40 or more per acre. And a lot of that depends on the situation and goals. If you're including a mix of legumes and brassicas, that sort of thing, for grazing or something, you run into quite a bit more money, but then you've got the revenue to offset it. Where if you're just doing a straight cereal rye mix or something, it's much cheaper. So there's a lot of variability there, as well as the price of the seed. Certainly encourage people to get certified seed from a reliable source and that sort of thing. But I do hear some producers for something like rye, they experiment with growing their own to cut costs. So it's things you can do like that to keep the cost down. And then of course, the planning cost, can you have equipment, you can do it yourself, or basically just the fuel and labor, or you have to hire a custom applicator, or something like, or make a major equipment investment or something to plant them. On the benefits side, certainly the first thing on most producers' mind would be that you'd like to see a yield improvement on the following crop, like Guillermo mentioned there. Producers in the SARE survey I mentioned tend to show a slight yield increase on average. And although it seems like it takes a few years, the yields tend to improve over a few years for one reason or another, if it's changes in soil health or just improvements in management. It does seem like yields tend to improve over time in those data. So that's interesting. Aside from the yield impact or cost savings, one thing that's often mentioned is fertilizer savings. And if you're in a situation where you can have a legume in the mix, it's pretty plain. You could see the nitrogen fixation there. I also hear reports sometimes about fertilizer savings for cover crops that don't include legumes, whether it's because of the biological activity or something making the P and K more available. There's reports of that I'd like to see more controlled research on that to see how what's really causing that. But there are those reports. Another benefit or negative is the excess soil moisture that a cover crop residue could take up in a wet year. That's a help. In a dry year, it's not so much. So that is a report that a benefit that people mention, as well as just maybe the cover crop residue might help you get on the field a little sooner and get a little more days in the field, possibly. Trying to figure out how to put an economic value on that, that's pretty difficult, but that is something we're looking at. And then there's obviously soil organic improvements, as well as offsite benefits like water quality and reduced flooding. Reduced erosion certainly is another benefit that won't maybe increase yields over the short run, but maintain soil productivity over the long run. And so a benefit there, as well as reduced sediment and road dishes and whatever that is an off-site benefit. I was just talking to a rural homeowner last night who was complaining about a ditch that ran across his property that was silting in. It was a small private ditch draining a few hundred acres of farmland, and he was upset about the sediment in there. So that's a off-site benefit in terms of being a good neighbor that he was commenting on. So lots of things to consider. And one last comment, there are studies that look at the economics of cover crops, and then there are other studies that look at the economics of a total soil health system, of which cover crops are a part, and reduced tillage and other things like variable rate application are in there. So two different perspectives. Are you interested in economics of just the cover crop or the whole system? The whole system is great and everything, but these kind of studies are a little bit hard to judge how much the cover crop contributes to that as well compared to the other parts of the package. So you do see studies like that out there too. So I think I'll stop there and see what questions there might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So with that, we are done introducing our panelists, and we open up for questions. And in fact, we are having several questions coming in right now, which I have it in front of me. So I will go ahead and read the questions to the panelists, and please feel free to jump into it and and talk about it if you feel that it fits to what you guys are doing. I will go with the first question, which I believe I can respond to that, but please feel free to chime in as well. So the first question I have from the participant is, do you know if there is much work being done for breeding cover crops for our conditions? Well, I can respond to that. Basically, yes. University of Minnesota in my department in agronomy and plant genetics, my breeder colleagues are actually working on breeding some cover crop species. I specifically know a little bit about camelina and pennycress, which are also considered cash crops. I know because I was talking with some of my colleagues a couple of weeks ago that they are about to test at field a new camelina variety that has a shorter season. And the beauty of camelina, which is a winter oilseed crop, is that it really fits very well for our harsh conditions, okay? So we usually plant camelina somewhere end in the summer or beginning of the fall. It gets established in the fall and then develops in the spring and can be terminated pretty easily. And some of the things that we have found from camelina is that it really traps a lot of nitrogen. It's still not very efficient on translocating that nitrogen into grain, but if we were to use it as a cover crop, it will work pretty well. So I also know that there are some efforts on breeding for cover crops in other parts of the country, which are led by the USDA actually. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, just to complement what you were saying, Axel, one of the researchers that I was working with in the area of Beltsville in Maryland, they do have a very large program of evaluation for new materials. But I would say in different environments that you guys have that are more in terms of limitations, right? But there are, if my understanding is correct, one of the components of this program was also located in Minnesota. My mind is fragile right now. I wouldn't remember the name for the professor involved in Minnesota, but they did have trials for veg and winter rye that is shorter in season. Yeah, just to complement what you were saying.
I might just throw in there that camelina research is interesting. One of the questions I think that people are wrestling with is there's a market for the camelina oil and meal and that sort of thing, but the question is how much consumers will pay for say camelina oil that's organic versus not organic. I think the research going on at Morris there is showing that it's harder to grow it organically and get good yields and everything, but the market might be a lot higher. So do you grow it organically or use herbicides on it?
That's true, yeah. Yeah, Jay.
Yeah, I don't know much about breeding new varieties of cover crops, but there are so many species to choose from that you know, there are a lot that for instance, in our system in Northwest Wyoming, we got a short window, and barley is really a great cover crop to follow barley. It grows extremely fast and has you know, a huge fibrous root system that we really see the benefits there.
Which one is that one you said?
Forage. Our farmers are usually interested in using cover crops as forage, either for hay or for grazing, which is a little bit of a, we can't really call them cover crops then, but so we're sort of leaning towards annual forages, but we still get the benefits.
Can you say it again, Jay, which species is that one in Northwest Wyoming? Oh, you are muted.
Just following barley with barley, replanting barley.
Okay.
So they plant their own seed. They can follow it's timely because they can follow the combine with the drill and get a lot of biomass by fall.
Okay, thanks. I hope we responded to that question. We have another one, and this is, what is the impact of cover crops on microbial life? Jay, Jose, or?
Yeah, that's one of the major benefits. The rise, you know, having living roots in the soil creates a rhizosphere. And in that rhizosphere, plants basically slough off or exude, you know, over 10% of the carbon that they fix from the atmosphere into that rhizosphere, which is food for microbes. And there's all kinds of microbes that form symbiotic relationships with the plants, not only mycorrhiza, which are really important, but phosphorus and potassium solubilizing bacteria and things like that use the carbon exuded by the plant roots and are able to solubilize forms of phosphorus or potassium that aren't available to plants. So there's all kinds of things like that going on, as well as immobilizing excess nitrogen from previous fertilizer applications and things like that will turn over and be released without being leached or otherwise lost. So that, yeah, that's a really important aspect of cover crops.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Jose, do you have something to?
I think Jay covered it. I completely agree. I mean, we know that there is a significant increase in the biological characteristics of the soil. Probably the only thing I want to add, we've done some research with some of our biological seed treatments and cover crop, and that can also enhance some of the yield under certain conditions as well. But that's something that some of our region farmers have been interested in, is the interaction of using some of the biological seed treatments along with cover crops, and it can increase definitely biomass. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question probably is for Jose, but please feel free to give your opinion on it. This is about a long-term trial that was conducted at University of Wisconsin, and the results show that apparently that was in a corn soybean rotation, but apparently that experiment showed that the cover crop was not able to increase soil organic matter. So the question is, how will carbon markets work in that situation? And also, cover crops have other advantages, but it looks like carbon sequestration might be an issue.
So my take on that, thank you, Les, and I think that's related with Anna's question as well, on the variability that exists in responses, right? And we've seen that in some of the meta-analysis that have been published in the research literature. And sometimes you see great responses, for example, in yield or carbon storage or lowering emissions. And in some other studies, we don't see it, right? And the problem there is like, it depends very much on site-specific conditions and also the length of those studies, the weather that we had during those years. So there's many factors, as I think Guillermo mentioned earlier. We're looking at whole systems, right? So my answer for Les and Anna will be, how do companies take into account, or I can tell you how Indigo does it. We want to develop quality credits. That's what what the clients are demanding, right? So with that, we do measure the carbon stock in the soil. So we're looking at implementing regen practices. We follow up in implementation because there is a concept of permanence. We also want to make sure that those practices are implemented in a long term, and we measure carbon stock in the soil. So you cannot get away without quantifying the real effect of those practices, right? So we know there's site-specific conditions that will control responses, but we do need to measure them. So we still need to, we're required by our clients and by our certifiers, because Indigo works with third-party certifiers that will certify those credits, to make sure that yes, those practices are working, right? And what I mentioned to Anna as well is what we want to work with many of our growers is on the concept of additionality, right? So it's not just implementing one practice, but it might be about conservation tillage and cover crops and nitrogen management, right? That's how you can really stack up some of those credits. I hope that helps Les, and if not, I'll be happy to comment.
Well, actually, we have a lot of questions regarding carbon sequestration in the carbon market. I would probably just go ahead and read another question that is related to this last one, which is, let me see if I can summarize here. But basically says that carbon markets are one of the top questions we've been getting these days. This participant says that we'd like to know how much data we have on practice like cover crops to sequester carbon, and where is this data from, and how much biomass will be needed, and can we achieve that level of growth in Minnesota, and how long does it take to see changes in soil carbon? I guess it's for you, Jose.
That's definitely, there's a lot of questions there, right? So yeah. I think I saw earlier the one about biomass. There's no question that biomass is key to make sure that some of those practices or some of those benefits are gonna be implemented. So I would say how much biomass you may need. I think the only study I recall is actually from Georgia, on some of the weed suppression, right? And yes, you need to probably have, I think this was one species, but I think they were reporting about 7,000 pounds per acre of biomass to really have that weed suppression there. So it's going to vary, and that's a little bit trickier. In terms of data, I mean, we have many people here. I think I know Anna is in the audience. I know perhaps Bill has some comments there. But what I can tell you is that we have seen an increase in cover crops for the last 10, 15 years dramatically. And there's been a lot more research going on throughout the Midwest. So not only in Minnesota. So there's a lot of data out there. It varies in terms of like length of the studies and species. I did like the question earlier about different species and maybe plant breeding as related with cover crops. I think that's something that we want to look into, because I know there can be variability as well in genetics. But I'll say there's plenty of data out there, and we have at the University of Minnesota, we have Anna and several researchers working on cover crops. I'll stop there and let maybe Bill or someone else.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just gonna ask Jose a question. Obviously, there's a number of companies out there kind of chasing this. I guess in terms of Indigo's case, what kind of time commitment? How many years does a producer need to commit to contract with this?
Yeah, so I believe it's 5 years. I'm trying to remember. That's a great question, Bill. I don't work directly with some of the, I believe it's 5 years. I'm gonna look it up and double check initially. It's either 5 or 10 years, depending on the contract. I wanna say our contracts are for 5 years, but there is the permanence, right, of those practices is the commitments that they are going to stay there, and I think that might be a lot longer than that in terms of permanence of practices. I'm going to double check, yeah. And I would say yes, there's a lot of companies out there. One of the in many ways, I feel like Indigo is a little bit ahead of the game. We've been doing a lot of research in soil carbon in the last couple of years throughout, the United States and in Latin America as well. And one of the big efforts that is driving Indigo is the science behind these credits. It's like we don't want to just give credits, but we do want to quantify that sequestration there. And I think that is the difference. And again, we're working with verifiers that are going to be looking at those credits and making sure that, that the practices implemented are definitely sequestering the emissions that we claim.
Thank you, Jose. Yes, Jay.
Yeah, I think it's challenging in a lot of ways. We know that cover crops can contribute to higher organic matter by sequestering carbon, but sometimes that in a crop rotation, the window of opportunity for cover crops only comes along every other year or even less often. So it's a slow process, and it's a little bit difficult to measure, to verify, especially if you're just looking at total organic carbon. We've started to look at a lot of things that indicate a trend, labile pools of carbon and microbial biomass. But yeah, that's one of the challenges, is that the opportunity for cover crops only comes along every once in every rotation, maybe. And then what else was I going to say? I can't remember.
That's okay. It will come.
Could I throw out something else? I was watching another webinar on carbon markets recently, and one of the speaker mentioned, we're showing a graph of the variability of soil organic matter carbon measurements from year to year, and was pointing out that if you happen, so maybe one year it'll be low and the next year might be high, just a random variation. And if you happen to, so you have to pick a starting point. So if you happen to pick a starting point, which was the high observation, then it's harder to get an increase over time. Where if you pick the year before when it was low, then it's much easier. So that random variation looks like it would be a big challenge in terms of just interpreting the soil test behind it.
Right. Just follow up, Jay, on what you just said about, the opportunity for cover crops to grow. A participant was asking why cover crops cannot be planted every year. I guess what you were trying to say is that every single year there are different challenges, and probably some of them are related to the variability of weather, for example. But maybe you want to clarify a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, in both Wyoming and Minnesota, we have, freezing temperatures come in October, and corn is harvested in October, and so are sugar beets. So there's unless you can figure out a way to intercrop, which people are doing, it's more difficult. But so if you can do that and get a cover crop going earlier in the fall, relay planting like that. But in the case of sugar beets, you have to dig them up, so that cover crop's going to be gone with no opportunity after that. So that's what I meant. In our case, the best window of opportunity is following small grains, and typically small grains aren't planted every year. An early harvest crop isn't planted every year, and after a late harvest crop like corn or sugar beets, it's much more difficult to get a cover crop going. The other thing I was gonna address, the biomass. How much biomass do you need? That varies a lot. I mean, we see the benefits, I think, anywhere from 500 pounds to an acre on up. Just, if you got good canopy coverage, I think you're gonna get benefits. The more root biomass and above ground biomass, the more organic material you're gonna cycle back, obviously. But biomass is definitely the key. So, and that's a challenge for us to get appreciable biomass.
Talking on biomass, I probably for Guillermo, allow me to read this question, Guillermo. Maybe you will address it as well. So basically, it's how seed timing may affect biomass production of cereal rye in the upper Midwest. I guess you have done some work with that.
Yeah, and I hear that this is something related that I was about to say before I heard your question.
Right.
But, yeah, I think that most of the things that we would be able to do in Iowa is winter rye. There are not a lot of other more advanced strategies for cover cropping. I mean, there's a lot of research going on right now with overseeding, more aggressive ways of trying cover crop associations, multi-cropping, et cetera. But I think that the two main lessons that we got over 5 or 6 years of research, coupling models and field research in cover crops, is that first, planting densities, like seeding rates, number of seeds per unit area, didn't matter that much. But timing is key. And the way that you can always think of is in terms of optimizing this window of opportunity, right? That is between the moment that you put the plants on the field and the moment that you terminate it, or that you spray it, or that you roll it, crimp it, or whatever the strategy they use for that. And those two moments, the way that you can either shrink or extend the window of growth for cover crops is key in order to potentiate and maximize biomass production. And regarding biomass, the other thing that I was wanting to say is just, I was hearing over Jose and Bill and Jay, yeah, prediction of biomass and simulation of biomass is such a difficult business, man. It's very, very difficult. It's in perspective, out of, in Iowa, there's this 15-year trial study going on by the USDA, and Tom Casper, you might have heard of him. And we used that field data to calibrate a model, agronomic model. We did the best that we could. We tried really hard to study the physiology of these plants, trying to capture the interannual variability in terms of weather and soil conditions. And out of 10 years of predictions, we were able to fit and right 5 times. So we were 50% of the time right. So we did no better than throwing on a coin, right? Using models that are very, very, very detail oriented. But the other thing that I got really, really surprised in another project when we were not really interested in modeling the interannual variability, but rather the variability going on within the field, right? And for that, we didn't use a lot of science. We used mostly statistics, right? And for that, we were able to get a really good representation of biomass variation in the field. And regarding to what Jay was saying, when we had, the two images or the two maps of variation in the field in regard to organic matter and biomass, the two overlap really well. So biomass is really, really a function of how the different soil dynamics go over time in the field. And we could, at least from a technical perspective, mainly an exercise of statistics, but I think that we really might think of trying to don't be lost on capturing everything at the fine-tuned detail, but rather trying to enhance predictions with more practical tools is what I would say.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you, Guillermo. So guys, we are still having some 4 or 5 minutes, but we have a lot of questions. So I don't think we are going to be able to address all of them, but to those who are still attending, we will respond to them even if by email. But I have a question that probably Jay can address it. And this is someone, he said that is from central Chile. I don't know if you, Jay, has been in Chile, but this gentleman, this person is asking if someone has had any experience on using native herbs to implement cover crops. And also whether or not we have evaluated the benefits over habitat in the areas where we have worked. So basically, what are the results using exotic herbs? Maybe you, Jay, in Wyoming have done that.
Using natives as cover crops?
Herbs. Native herbs.
Right, so native wildflowers.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent idea, and in CRP they're really pushing natives, and it's working great. At my parents' farm in Iowa, they've converted all their CRP to tallgrass prairie, and it's amazing, and the soil quality has improved drastically. In Wyoming, in reclamation situations, we've started to use a lot of native annual forbs as a sort of cover crop to get rapid cover, compete well with weeds, things like bee plant and flax and some other species that I can't name off the top of my head, but they're planted with the longer term perennial grasses and forbs, but there are definitely possibilities for doing that, and it would improve pollinator values and a lot of other things, I think, to add more natives where possible in cover crop mixes.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you, Jay. I have a question for Bill. So in a strict sense, cover crops should not be harvested for economic benefits. That's my definition of cover crops, So and before our time goes, I wanted to ask you, so how this will go, because one of the most difficult things we researchers face is determining the economic benefits of those cover crops. So what are the most obvious benefits in terms of economics that we can get from?
Yeah, I mentioned the impact on the following crop. Yield certainly is the thing that I think most people are interested in first, and that might be because of increase in soil organic matter, decreased compaction, soil compaction, weed suppression. These are all possible benefits. Whether they actually see them on a particular farm situation, I don't know, but weed suppression, I've had producers mention on soybeans a possible reduction in soybean diseases like white mold. Over the long run, certainly, if you're in a erodible situation, decreased soil erosion. And then there are a few people I know south of the Twin Cities that are experimenting with early interseeding, like in June, and with something like ryegrass. And one of the things they argue is they see reduced soil temperatures in the real hot days in summer that they think would benefit crop yields. And then on the things that are not related to yields, certainly the water quality and nitrogen sequestration benefit from a societal standpoint, increased water infiltration that might reduce flooding. I mentioned the offsite sediment damage, so wildlife possibly. So those are some of the things that would come to mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Okay, guys, so it's noon. We are supposed to be done at noon. So for, to respect everybody's time, I will have to close this webinar here today. I would really love to keep going with this because I have a bunch of questions that it would be nice to hear from our panel of experts, from economics all the way to people who would like to know more about Indigo, Jose. So maybe you want to share your information in the screen if you wanted. And also some questions regarding to modeling, those kind of things that myself, I also have for Guillermo. Jay, also, there were more questions that you could probably have been very happy to address, such as how to have a successful cover crop establishment in semi-arid regions, those kind of things. But I guess indirectly you talk about that at the beginning of your participation. So it's really, it has been really a very, very good experience for me, and I hope it was for the participants as well. Thank you, panelists and participants for joining us today. So I hope we were able to deliver what we wanted, which is to advance a little bit our understanding on how cover crops could be beneficial, not only for the environment, but also, in terms of economics, those kind of things, and also to let you know more or less what advances we are having and tools we are using, to try to understand more how cover crops grow and develop in conditions like here in Minnesota and also in Wyoming and other places. To participants, please share your feedback with us in the evaluation that was put in a link on the chat. And also, I would like to invite you to our next Advancing Ag webinar, which is going to happen on Wednesday, May 26th, and will feature discussion on ag business management. What can the past tell us about today and tomorrow? There is information available at z.umn.edu/advancing-ag. So with that, once again, I thank you, everybody, and we will be in touch with you regarding how this all went. So thank you very much.